name is Julia Perry, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have been 15 years, for the bulk of my career, I was working in film entertainment, PR and marketing for film studios like MGM and 20th Century Fox Films. And about 5 years ago, I pivoted and went from film to fashion. And I founded two companies, 5.0 Brand and Image and Accidental Stylist. And I have offices both in New York City and in France, where I sort of specialize in brand building and leveraging opportunities for my clients to have awareness and build business. But for the last 15 months, along with Liz Cabral, who's also on this panel, we are co-founders in the fashion sector with a part of the US Coalition on Sustainability, the tech platform, which is called SustainChain. And SustainChain is a global engine for collaborating, unifying, and accelerating efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in this decade of action. So that's a little bit about me and SustainChain.
We've been working on this relentlessly for the last 15 months. And as you can imagine, during this time, any sort of sustainable efforts has felt like a complete whirlwind and bullet train. Before I get into a little bit about my role and how I've been part of the SustainChain effort, prior to that, I spent a good part of the last 2 decades fully immersed in the fashion world, mostly via an editorial background. I was the fashion director and consultant for multiple international magazines. And I parlayed that into a consulting and brand strategy business where I worked with a lot of global brands. And about 5 years ago, I really focused in on the idea of purpose-driven creative and strategy. I think 5 years ago, purpose and the idea of sustainability wasn't necessarily commonplace within the luxury fashion sector. Those were, not so commonly known words and terms. And so I've managed to build a career out of that and really working with aligned brands and organizations and creating really purpose-driven storytelling and brand strategy. So that's where my role at SustainChain comes in. I like to think of myself as a bit of a connector, really, bringing in and rallying the private sector within fashion, everything from independent small brands to large conglomerates focused on the luxury market. And really it's about creating SustainChain as a platform, a real action-driven marketplace for these different stakeholders, the brands, the NGOs, the solution innovators, the social impact investors, bringing these various stakeholders together in one common place to share best practices, best learnings, and really create a really accelerated pathway to the Sustainable Development Goals that are really imminent. 2030 is not that far away. So we're working against a really tight timeline to create some serious impact and move the needle in the way of sustainability. And so we're working collectively through collective and collaborative and connective action with these various stakeholders, not just in fashion, but really cross-sector. As we know, everything is interconnected and touches upon itself. And so we're using the good that everyone's doing out there, sharing it in a central platform so that we can all sort of work as fast as we possibly can.
I also just want to add a little bit further because not everyone is familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. Basically, they're the mastermind of Amina Mohammed, who's the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. And it was not an easy feat to sort of come up with what is called, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the reason that Liz and I are both so passionate in this type of in this work is because so many of us care about many things. We care about global warming, we care about rainforests, we care about, life underwater, we care about climate change. poverty, workers' rights, and so on. And if you have an opportunity just to look up the Sustainable Development Goals, they touch on all of these things. I mean, they really, really deal with everything from protecting the planet to protecting wildlife, to protecting the most vulnerable of humans, education, diversity, and so on. And that's why that was really something that Liz and I could really roll up our sleeves and say, you know what, being part of this and accelerating change in this area is really damn good for all of us.
We do take for granted that not everyone or every brand or company out there is familiar with the SDGs, those 17 goals. Some already subscribe to them and are really using them as sort of a roadmap to their own sustainable goals within their KPIs for the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years. And some really don't know where to start. So I think that's where the SDGs really function as a very sort of hands-on and accessible tool in order to navigate where to start, what needs to get done, and what as a brand or individual you can really sort of focus on. It feels really overwhelming, right? As you like to say, we can't boil the ocean. And certainly in the way of sustainability, it's easy to become paralyzed in the just like everythingness of it. So it's great to sort of identify, okay, this is a goal that I know that myself or my company can really work towards. And I can track the progress of that through a platform like SustainChain. And I can seek out, collaborative partners and sort of just to help to facilitate all that progress we need.
Yeah, exactly. We like to call them our North Star. It helps us to sort of make sure that we're staying on this pathway, for sustainable, positive practices.
Yes, we say that the SDGs are our North Star and the technology is our driver. And so while the U.S. Coalition on Sustainability is, as we say, a coalition, really sort of SustainChain as a technical platform and tool it is how we're sort of making it all work. It's the how, the now what of it all. Sustainability is our only real sort of priority, at least, progress and making, accelerated impact and change in the way of sustainability. And as we've mentioned, the material sustainability is one aspect. I think what sort of fails to get recognized sometimes is the really holistic and all-encompassing world and supply chain. It's not just about material sustainability. It's not about the materials we're consuming or the things that we're using. It's about the people behind that supply chain. Who's making your clothes? Under what conditions? We're not trying to create just sustainable fashion. We're trying to create a sustainable world, a world in which we can all thrive and live in. And so it really is the focus. It's literally within the fiber and the DNA of everything that we're doing. And whether that is, through clean water, or as Julia said, no poverty, or equal rights for all. The idea here is to create a world that is sustainable for everyone, and not just sustainable, but also regenerative, and what that also means.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when you're talking about prioritizing something, for us, it's like we want to give our brands and innovators and everyone the opportunity to say, this is what I need. My priority, this week or this month or this year is I want to use less plastic, or I want to have better packaging, or I have to deal with waste disposal, whatever that is. Whatever issue a brand or an innovator or someone may have, that becomes our priority. We're here to sort of connect as many people as we can, to sort of convene and see if we can come up with a solution. Because it's only if we come out of our individual silos, where we find out so many times hundreds of people are tackling the same problem, that we can see that, wow, okay, we can help each other, we can fix this, and we can, solve it.
Yeah, and we're really focused on, a variety of, there's just a different scope and a variety of projects and stakeholders within the platform. When I say stakeholders, it's, brands, NGOs, organizations that are really tackling these issues. But it's really about identifying, as Julia said, what's currently being done. We don't want to create duplicated efforts. I think that's part of the challenge in really achieving sustainable success and progress is everyone working in those individual silos and therefore slowing down the process unnecessarily. So there's really no time for everyone to be working individually. And so it's focusing on what are these collective initiatives? What are these tipping point areas that are really going to create that necessary change as quick as we need to? How can we convene the right leaders, the right voices? What are the topics of discussion right now? And we'll get into that a little bit more as we talked about, regenerative agriculture and circularity within fashion. Those are the two of the key things that come to mind, that we're specifically focused on convening the right leaders and bringing their learnings, their expertise to bear, and to really create a blueprint essentially that can then be sort of, everyone can take that blueprint, can take those findings and really scale them to their own needs and create that change.
Oh, how has it not affected? I mean, when I think about Liz and I, running from showroom to showroom during, Paris Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week, Milan, trying to hit the shows, just sort of dealing with the next collection, figuring out how we're going to style our next editorial and so on. I mean, what the pandemic did is it actually hit this unbelievable global pause button or alert halt button. And in a lot of ways, Liz and I ended up doing probably some of our best work ever. We started to reach out to brands and like-minded people that were feeling the same things that we were. We finally decided to stop talking about all the things that we were doing wrong, right? We all heard it so many times, like too much consumption, too much production, too many deep discounts. You couldn't find a linen dress in August because it was already pre-fall. And I mean, all the things that we were doing wrong. I think fashion finally realized that if we're going to fix the mess that we've created, if we want to stop talking about all the bad habits that we've accumulated, year after year, decade after decade, now is the time. So as I mentioned, Liz and I started reaching out once the platform SustainChain went into beta. We had unbelievable people, working with us. ThoughtWorks sort of committed a whole team that started to build from they called from a blank sheet of paper what is needed to start convening the big thinkers and the brands and so on together to sort of rebuild back better and faster. And it was unbelievable the kind of response that we received. I mean, we reached out to NGOs like, Textile Exchange, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Fashion for Good, SAC, and they said, you're right. We need to come out of our walled gardens, our silos, and start talking to each other. We ended up having such early support from incredible brands like, Gabriela Hearst and Hoffman and Patagonia. And we realized that, we had so much in common. So many people wanted to do the right thing, and now was the time to do it.
Yeah, I think Julia's right. We were a little concerned because we really started off on this journey full throttle back in February of 2020. So just before the world came to a screeching halt. And we did ask ourselves, what is this going to mean? I mean, we personally obviously knew a lot of businesses that were hugely affected, that had to push pause on all of their operations, were potentially seeing the end of their lifelines as they knew it. And we were concerned that this was perhaps just going to stall our efforts at that time. But what COVID and the pandemic really proved to be was an opportunity for reflection, for willingness, for enthusiasm, for the, okay, now we can actually sit still long enough to not just recognize that how this system has been functioning needs to change, but to really listen and make the effort, as Julia said, to build back a better foundation. You know, a lot of our partners and really valuable members said, you know what, I've got to rethink my whole strategy anyways due to COVID. Why not do it in the most sustainable and planet-friendly way that we can? And so it really proved to be an opportunity to capture people's time and attention. And so we were able to really take that and roll with it. And we had a lot of really great enthusiasm and willingness to want to be part of this sort of bigger picture. I think people saw us coming in as like a technology solution that was really focused, driven on action and outcomes and results. And I think that the last thing we needed at that point was to continue to say and talk and be on panels about, okay, we all know that the sustainable way is the right way. And a lot of companies, I mean, a lot of the feedback we heard was that as far as, you know, larger organizations and at a CEO level, that they recognize they've identified their sustainability goals. They know what needs to be done. The question really is how. And there was this level, like this plateau of like, where do we go from here? So it was really fascinating in that we've talked to so many different you know, brands, organizations, innovators, et cetera, that are at such different, you know, sort of points in progress, in their own progress, in their own sort of journey to sustainability. And so whether it was a really small brand just starting off and going, I don't know how to do it. Like, how do I achieve sustainable success? How do I do this as a small brand with no money, no resources, no anything? But then there was also, like, on the other end of that spectrum, there were those big companies and CEOs that we spoke about that were like, this is amazing. We've hit a plateau. We don't know how to take it to that next level. And so as a technology solution, I think people really saw that as what was going to take us to that next phase of impact and progress that we needed to get to.
We realized that the pandemic knows no borders. So this was like a global problem, and it really sort of cracked open, you know, global supply chains and the things that were happening on the other side of the world, and, you know, shipping and workers not being paid. I mean, there was just so many things that you know, particularly fashion, but a lot of other industries, you know, were forced to look at and showed, again, to show how interconnected we all are. And if we're going to get to the goals that we want, we've got to come together.
Absolutely. And I think back to that conversation we had with Lewis Perkins, Julia, at the Apparel Impact Institute just last week, and how he was saying, you know, a lot of what they did was traveling the world to these multiple conferences and doing sort of work in real time, you know, in various parts of the world. And with COVID sort of putting all of that on a full stop, how having something like technology to pick up that convening aspect and to still, you know, without a beat, you sort of, you know, you just keep going and you stay connected, and you continue to realize what needs to be done and who your collaborative partners are and can be at that point. I think it's accessibility, transparency into resources, just having the ability to know what vendors, what innovative solutions are out there for them from a brand perspective. You know, just compiling that sort of Rolodex of all the good players that are going to make that impact in their business in the right way. I know that, you know, for a small or medium brand, that's a huge thing. They don't have the time or the bandwidth to be out there sort of pounding the pavement and figuring out what innovator solutions they should be relying on, what factories do they need to be, you know, aligning with, et cetera. So it's really about surfacing that network in a really accelerated way, in an accessible way. I personally think that, you know, the fashion industry is really good at talking the talk. And I think what it needs to do is just come to the plate with a little bit more follow through and really see things through. And to make this, it's a necessity. It's a necessary part of any company. It's really not a good to have. It's a need to have at this point. And really just not making excuses for why things can't get done. I think also, we've come off a time where a lot of brands and a lot of industry players have wanted to be everything to everyone. And, scaling your business up was the biggest priority. And it was an achievement to be in every type of, category and market possible, from, perfumes to accessories to this and that. And I think we lost sight of how successful and what success can look like if you're focused on just creating a really great product with the least amount of impact to the planet and the people. That in itself is success. And it's not necessary to spread all of these, all of your resources so thin in trying to be everywhere in the way of, that industry landscape.
First thing that you hear, when it comes to challenges, we're a small brand, we don't have the money, we don't know where to start. But I think what you said was very clear. We have to sort of change what success looks like. And, to be really, true to your brand, the DNA of your brand, that you want to be sustainable, you want to be doing right by your employees and the supply chain and so on. And just, not to be afraid to sort of take the time you need to find, the partners or the fabric or whatever, so that you can do what you feel is best for your product.
And Julia, I think of, what Gabriela Hearst so kindly said about SustainChain last year, about, what took her 5 years to do as a company can take 5 minutes. It's a generous exaggeration, but we like to use it anyways. With a platform like SustainChain, because you have this one centralized platform that really surfaces solutions. So the idea of shortcutting that time, because I think that's what we hear resoundingly from a lot of brands and companies, is they want to do it, they just don't know how, they don't know where to start, and they don't have the resources or the time. And so that's where I think it's about, tackle one problem and one solution at a time, prioritize, what sort of impacts within your company you want to be making, and just do it. So, as we've said, the time to just talk is over. And the hardest step is the first step in just doing it in that way. And really just finding an effective way to communicate with customers and just civil society, as we say, that's an integral part of your brand and your company. And we know that it's of importance to the customer. We know consumers want to make the better choice and they're willing to pay a premium to do so. I think the biggest challenge is they don't know how or where to get started. They don't know who's really doing the good work and how to find them. And so I think this idea of creating really, clear, effective communication and storytelling with your customer that's really driven in purpose and mission is going to become increasingly important. And I think that we're seeing that. And so finding, you have to find a way as a brand and a company now to convey that sustainability is sexy in the same way that we thought, being just fashionable is sexy. That's just sort of not enough anymore, right?
Well, it's sort of a shameless plug, but, join SustainChain, because I think you're going to find a lot of your answers there. And as I mentioned, it's nonprofit and it's free. But, more than ever, a brand has so much control over the messages that are out there now. Before you were dependent on buyers, or you were so reliant on reviews. And really now, as Liz was mentioning earlier, you can control your own story. You can speak to your customer and say, you know what? Our fall collection isn't going to arrive now until September 20th, not July 20th, because we've taken the time to do this, and this. And I think, those are the things that people appreciate: communicate, transparency, that you're trying to do the right thing. And that's sort of the kind of advice that I would give if someone was trying to stay on the path of being as sustainable as possible.
I think it's also very important to be grounded in values as a brand and not lose sight of that. I think integrity is critical to the success of any brand right now, especially when we're living in a time of just overabundance and too much of everything. And that goes in the way of too much product, too much choice, too much consumption. I think that you really have to connect with your customer through, a really sort of a real genuine, just level of integrity, and just really communicating to them that as a brand, you're trying to do the right thing. You're taking the steps to do the right thing. Now, how do those brands do the right thing? I think it's, as we said before, it's really about creating a prioritized list. It can be a short list of what your sustainable goals are, but really identifying what those are. What are the easiest sort of low-hanging fruit ways in which you can make a direct impact to your footprint as a company in an environmental and from a human perspective? And really don't play dumb. I think that there's really no excuse in knowing what the impact of your production choices are. You need to know as a brand where your stuff's being made, who's making it, how it's being made, what is its impact on that. We talk a lot of times about this idea of creating a paradigm shift. There's been like a few players that hold all the control and make all the decisions, and therefore, the changes we know need to happen aren't necessarily being made because, the bottom line is what's driving those decisions and those impact. Pressure really needs to be coming at, those suppliers and those factories from a brand perspective. Brands need to just emphasize their desire for those right choices from a supply chain perspective. So, I think the biggest word of advice is live your values as a brand, really communicate and connect with your customer, find a way so that they understand what you're doing, and really, identify and prioritize some achievable and accessible, sustainable goals for yourself. We like to say all the time, you vote with your dollar. And we believe in the idea of a consumer activist. And so, again, knowledge is power. And so you need to know who you're supporting. You need to know what your support means and what that impact has beyond just yourself. What is you making the right choice versus the not so right choice? What are the implications of that? So I think as a consumer, the best thing you could possibly do is really educate yourself. I know that it can feel like an overwhelming position to be in, and it's not always easy to navigate, especially, there's a lot of greenwashing and green marketing happening out there. But I think now more than ever, you have the ability to really do your homework. Every company out there that's doing something in the way of sustainability is going to champion that and scream it from the rooftops. So if you're supporting a brand or a company that doesn't promote what their sustainability initiatives are, you can probably take a pretty good guess that they're not doing it. There are sustainability reports out there if you have the time to dive into those. Some are easier to read than others, but it's really about being informed and taking the responsibility, being accountable for your choices as a consumer.
Exactly. And it still comes down to, how it's sort of second nature. If you pick up a cereal box or a bag of granola or look at yogurt, you look at sort of the ingredients and what it's made of and so on. We need to start thinking about that before we vote with our fashion dollars, as Liz mentioned. We have the power, the public has the power to change policy, to put pressure on brands, to do the right thing, and we have the right to ask for full transparency. And unlike maybe 5 years ago, it's really great that there's so many brands out there that are doing this and are doing the right thing. So if it's a matter of, maybe this fashion item or this that's maybe a little bit more, or perhaps swapping clothes, or perhaps, repairing something or reusing something, look at options. We do really have options. So let's start considering them. It isn't always just about buying the hottest thing.
Yeah, and I think it's really about it. I mean, it comes down to a real sort of shift in behavior and habit. And I think that, as consumers, we've just sort of become accustomed to just replacing or just getting more of. This idea of just buying and consuming has just sort of become the second nature to us. And we don't think really about what the impact of all of that consumption is. So I would just really look at what your impact as an individual is and think about literally everything that you buy, really give it actual due process and thought. Do I need this? Or do I really love this? Can I not live without this? So just really think things through and take the time to make really considered choices. I think that's really the direction in which we need to go as far as consumers. And we all know that, you can have every brand creating amazing sustainable things and innovators out there with, the most fascinating and life-changing solutions. But until us as consumers, drive that real desire, and as Julia said, create the pressure to want to do and buy better, that change will never happen. Really, sort of this idea of massive impact is only going to arrive at that place if civil mass society drives it there. So make your voice heard, scream as loud as you possibly can that this is what you want. Make the demand. It's just never enough to sort of resign yourself to, well, that's just what's out there. If you want the change, you've got to create and demand the change.
Well, first of all, this has been really great for Liz and I. As I mentioned, we're co-founders of the fashion sector for SustainChain, which is a global engine for collaborating people who are involved in the sustainability pathways. It's just been, really great. You've had so many great speakers on the platform. I'm really looking forward to listening to all of them. So thank you so much, the Sustainable Fashion Forum. If there was just one thing that I would suggest people to do, maybe there's two. One is probably stop talking about sustainability and just start supporting it and doing the right thing. And the other one is just wear, 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 your values, wear the change you want to see in the brands that you're supporting. And Liz touched on it earlier. Think about everything that you're buying, whether it's the food or electronics or your sneakers or furniture, all of these things. Let's start being more aware of what our purchases and our consumer dollars are doing to those less vulnerable who are making the clothes, and the kind of harm they're doing to our planet and our valuable resources.
Absolutely, Julia. You couldn't have said it better. So, I wanted to personally thank the Sustainable Fashion Forum for even creating the platform and the place for us to have these ongoing, really critical discussions. I think it's important to continue to learn and hear from others that are out there doing the hard work on the ground. So thank you for that and for having us. It's been such a pleasure. We always like to talk about all of this. We could go on and on all day. And so as Julia, I have two things I think to sort of call to action. And the first is another shameless plug. I would say, log on to SustainChain2030.com. If you're looking for a way to be part of this collaborative and collective action. And as far as things that are sort of down the pipeline, we're really excited. Until now, we've been a very industry focused platform, and we've been really laser focused on convening all of these leaders to create this really impactful and solution-driven place. But we're in the near future going to create an experience for civil society in which you can have the same informed journey towards 2030 in the way of achieving success in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're very excited. So stay tuned. We're going to be making announcements sometime in the summer about all of that great stuff coming in the way. And yeah, I think to Julia's point, it's, just be aware of what your impact is in the world and how everything is so interconnected, and every decision has, an impact and a consequence to it, whether that's good or bad. So